Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to July 6th, 2023. And this is another edition of the MSP Initiative Live. Hashtag MSP Talk. Just some housekeeping get done at the beginning of all these sessions, and then we'll get into some good stuff. Here we go. MSPinitiative.com. This and every other session we've ever done is here in podcast and video format. So that is under the Sessions tab. We have our in-person event this year. We parked the bus. We started up this new event called MSP Community Minds. This is going to be in Denver, August 14th and 15th. We got a ton of community minds from around MSP land. Some are panels, a lot of workshops. So check out the agenda, check out the venue. Basically, it's 2 days of legitimate, just brain download. But more than just death by PowerPoint, we're actually trying to teach you something and workshop you through things. So if you're interested, it is 100% free to register for this event. You do got to get there. And we tried to negotiate a really good room rate, but we are not charging you absolutely anything as an MSP to register for this event. So take advantage of it. We think it's going to be good for you. Now, of course, we have our famous block parties. We completed the MSP block party in Dublin. If you hit the MSP Initiative Facebook page, we posted the album for all the photos from this one. This was really cool. We expect to do this one again next year, so stay tuned. I would circle it. I think it's the 11th through the 14th of June next year. We're doing it all over again. Next, we have the MSP Community Boat Party. We're working with folks over at Taylor Business Group and their conference called the Taylor Business Group Big Conference. We do a 5-story mega yacht party down the Intercoastal in Fort Lauderdale. We love this one. It worked out really well last year. Can't wait for this one. Even if you're not going to the event, you're just an MSP in the greater Florida area and you think you want to jump onto this, that is okay too. Then we're going to DattoCon in Miami. So stay tuned for information on that. That's going to be in early October. Again, don't have to be going to the conference to join us. If you're in the Miami area or South Florida area, you can join. And then this last one is the Orlando one. That is the one where we brought the All-American Rejects in last year, and we're very close to announcing our band for this year. That is the big one that anchors the year in Orlando in I think the second week of November. So stay tuned. We're gonna announce that one very soon. Here's some community offers from a couple of companies from around the industry. We hope this grows. Just basically cool specials for IT land. Lastly is our industry calendar, which is really just our homework for the year. Kind of just put it all in one place. And if we're missing anything, feel free to submit it so that we can keep everybody up to date. So that's everything that's happening for the rest of the year in MSP Initiative land. As you can tell, we bleed MSP and IT community. So take advantage of one of those things. Otherwise, we hope to run into you somewhere out, on the road, or if not in cyber land. And that is all of the housekeeping for today. Hopefully everybody had a great 4th of July. My favorite holiday. Who doesn't like barbecues and fireworks and pools and probably beaches and mountains, and it's like America's birthday. I mean, how do you go wrong with that? But I digress. We bring our special guest on the show today, Steve, who is going to introduce himself in a second, but he has joined us before. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about him and his company and his background, and then we'll see what's happening in the current events of MSP land from a cyber landscape. Steve, how you doing today, buddy?
Good, George. How you doing? Great to see you.
Absolutely. Doing well, man. Doing well. It's right in the thick of the summer vacation months. Although IT never goes to sleep, right?
It's true.
We always, not joke, but remind people that, not too long ago during these holiday seasons or when bad things happened in MSP land, right? So gotta stay
keep watching,
kind of vigilant.
Watching at all times. It's true.
Yeah, 100%. For anyone that has not run into you before or met you before, why don't you go ahead and do a quick intro so people can get a little bit of background, and then why don't you go ahead and intro your company as well?
Okay. And again, my name is Steve Rutkovitz. I'm the CEO of Choice Cyber Solutions. To give you some background, I was an MSP. I started in 1995 with one person built an MSP, 2 people, 3 people, has got more work. And over the years, I was an MSP for 21 years, built it up to 40 people over time. And in 2017, I had the opportunity to have a successful exit to actually my competitor up the street, actually called DP Solutions. The company at the time was called Choice Technologies. They came to me doing acquisition, and I just started getting deep into security and compliance and really became passionate about it. A lot of my clients were in the DC, Baltimore area, and had government contractors and medical and financial, and they started getting more and more cybersecurity concerns and compliances. So I became a real student of it. And long story short, we sold them the MSP in 2017 and spun off a pure play security and compliance company, just to help MSPs around the country and now around the world provide advanced cybersecurity and compliance services to their clients. Today, we do about 15 different compliances. So we keep building as more and more MSPs need different compliances. And we have a partner reseller program, and we have about 100 MSPs now signed up we work with, and we're looking to grow and help MSPs provide these compliance and cybersecurity services to their clients.
That's awesome. Thanks for the background. Let's talk about your exit for a minute. That was like right before, 2017 was, like I would say 2019 was like the year, right? That was the one where everything was kind of like all guns blazing. And then we know what happened right after that, right? We all got locked up for about 2 years. But 2017 was a pretty good year, if memory serves. A lot, I don't know if you're, in a position where you can talk about it, but like,
sure,
the devil's in the details, right? Like how people ultimately get a correct valuation for their company, and then ultimately, like, what does the deal look like, right? Everybody has different versions of this. Was it everybody would love all cash up front, but I know that doesn't happen often. Some people have like hey, there's a part of it that's up front. There's a part of it with like you sticking around consulting for the company for a few years. And then maybe there's some sort of trailing number. Like, there's a mix and match of all sorts of different scenarios. But I love to hear these stories, by the way, because it kind of like helps people understand how the business works.
Yeah, so since then I talked to a lot of MSPs, and a lot of the times they ask me, okay, you did a successful exit, which should I be thinking about? And it was really, if I look back, I could have been a whole lot more prepared. So what I would say to MSPs is you should always be ready for sale. And you should really set your company up as if you're always ready for a sale. And so what does that mean? So when the company came to me, all they cared about was recurring revenue. So, there's recurring projects, there's predictable projects, there's, T&M work that we did. You had to do it because you had to do it, like new systems or one-offs or whatever, but they were micro-focused on the recurring revenue. And so my advice to MSPs now is you want to try to get as much recurring revenue as you possibly can in your business. It doesn't have to be locked up for 3 years, doesn't have to even have a 1-year contract. We do most of our contracts month to month. But in our new business in cybersecurity and compliance, we're like 90% recurring revenue because that has the value. So when you see MSPs that say, I'll get to it, or I'm not maximizing it, well, then when somebody comes along, you're not going to get the highest number for your business. So you should always be ready for somebody to come along and either, say, I'm ready to buy your business, or you're ready to sell the business, and really think about how to maximize that value. And it takes years to kind of lead into it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I talk to a lot of MSPs and they say, I want to sell my business. And I say, what are you going to do after? Right? So are you going to retire? Do you have hobbies? Are you going to start another business? What are you going to do? Because it's important, because once, I call my MSP I call it the golden goose, and it kept laying eggs, right? It was a profitable machine that laid eggs. But once you get that cash or that chips off the table, you're actually killing the goose, right? So then what are you going to do after that? So I think it's important, not just from a financial standpoint, but as you as a person, what do you want to do? And the third thing is you got to be careful about how long you stay on, because, as an entrepreneur, one of the things you like is that you have this flexibility, you do things your way, and then you go to work for an MSP. I had to work for a year, 20 hours a week. And they kept asking me my opinion, and they did the total opposite. After a while, I'm like, what are you asking me my opinion for? So it's hard to work for other people sometimes when you're your own entrepreneur calling the shots for a number of years as an MSP. So, but all in all, I would say it was a good experience. We had 40 people moved over to Colombia, which is another part of, and they already had offices, and 90% of the customers stayed with the company, and 90% of the employees stayed. So it was actually a good transaction. So that was my experience.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, some people have great experiences. Some people have, a little bit of pain on everybody's side, right? They say that's usually when the deal is fair, but some people have really bad experiences.
Yeah, and I would say, the dollars. When I was young, I sold a company in my 20s, and it was a lot of paper on the back end, and they got in trouble with no fault of mine, and then I never got paid. So, when the second time out of the gates, I said, look, I want an all cash deal. And they said, well, I got to hold 10% back as for a year as a holdback, because you might have receivables, payables, et cetera, that have to be worked out. But I was fine with that. But it wasn't like the lion's share on the back end. Be very careful of that, because things can happen if it's paper, and things can go wrong.
That's true. And the economy changes, and something
Yeah.
could go bad, right? Like Matt Lee always, talks about the story when he was working at his MSP before PAX 8, that they acquired an MSP. He was, doing about $1 million a year in business. And then they had like 2 or 3 consecutive cyber incidents, whatever you want to call it. And like all the employees left, all the customers left, effectively had a empty shell of a company that they paid for, and like within a short window, like literally evaporated in front of them.
Yeah, so that's another point. So really the fourth lesson I learned was I had an attorney, and I said, I'm going to sell my company. He says, people are going to find out. I said, well, nobody's going to find out. We're going to keep this secret, and we're going to have that in writing. So I had the buyers sign something that says they're going to keep it secret till it's actually till the money's in the bank, till the money's wired. And the lawyer said, it's impossible, never been done before. And I said, well, that's what we're doing, or I'm not doing a deal. And we had that completely secret to the day of the actual money being wired. Because remember, we're a services business, and like you said, if your techs leave, you're what do you have, right? If your clients leave, they're worried and they go somewhere else. The business is for sale. So all we really have is our clients, and our intellectual property is really our people and our knowledge. So you want to try to keep a secret as much as you possibly can.
How did you so there's this due diligence period, right? Where everybody like signs
7 months
signs NDAs, opens up the the covers, and figures out what do you actually have, right? What's actually under contract? What's the books look like? That kind of stuff. Is there anything through that period that you would say you wish you knew ahead of time? We heard recurring revenue loud and clear. Anything else that came through that process that you're like, I could have been better prepared for X?
Yeah, you want to maximize your profits, right? So when you have your financial statements, they're going to look back at least 3 years. So you want to have clean financial statements. You're putting things on the business, or you might be getting, vacations, whatever you're doing, put on the business. Be careful of that, right? You want to show a 3-year track record of maximizing the profits. Why? Because most companies are evaluated based on times EBITDA, earnings before taxes, and depreciation, whatever else they factor in. And the cleaner your books, the faster things go. I have a friend of mine, because people call me now, because I did a really successful, exit on a $6 million company. And they call me all the time. What should I do? And I advise people. And I just had a friend who actually could not sell the business in the last hours because they were paying too many people with 1099s and not enough payroll, and they got nervous, right? That there's backlash of payroll taxes or something. So you want to have clean books, and you want to, like I said, if you're thinking about selling in a couple of years, you want to clean things up today, and you want to maximize recurring revenue, because that's going to be your highest value. So 3 years is a long time. So you really want as clean as statements as you possibly can for as long of a period of time as you can.
No, it's good advice. And quite frankly, we have like people like Reed Warren from IT Valuations on from time to time, and other people. And the way your books,
he was with the company at the time that we actually got sold as a revenue rocket. He was
at Revenue Rocket. Yeah, he broke off and started a second company. The way that you do your accounting for taxes is not the same as the books presentation for the sale of your business. Like I hear this now on a regular, right? Like your CPA is just worried about your tax liability, which is important. I'm not saying it, avoid that. It has to be handled properly, but like, that's not the same, that thing that they're looking for when they're trying to evaluate your company.
Well, they're related, I think, but what happens when you get this thing called EBITDA? Blah, 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 all over, they can say, well, you take personal health insurance, you might take personal life, and so it's a lot of gray of what EBITDA really is and what gets backed out to get that number. Because remember, you got to get that number as high as you can as an MSP, because it's usually a multiple of, in different years or different times. It could be anywhere from, I've heard 4 to 7 times multiple, depending on how specialized you are. If you have more cyber and compliance, you may have more of a vertical, you might get a little higher valuation based on your verticalization or specialization. But the bottom line is that you have to really understand that those numbers are gray. So I just went back to them and said, look, I just want to make it a multiple of the revenue, right? So I took the revenue as a quantifiable number, and I asked for, a multiple of the number of the top number, instead of they were going back and forth on EBITDA. This is included, it's not included. It was, kind of difficult. It was almost a negotiation on the EBITDA. And then you had to get a multiplier out. So I was trying to stay away from EBITDA and try to went more to the top line, because that was a more definable number. You could take 3 years of your revenue and then work off a multiple of that.
Did they go for that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So it depends how bad somebody wants your business. These were a really motivated buyer that came to me in the area that wanted to expand. But if, it's not such a motivated buyer and you're more motivated than they are, then sometimes the deal can turn a little bit and they have more in the driver's seat. So you also got to show that if you don't sell it, no big deal. You have to really make sure that you're in a good position. And I would say if you can get multiple buyers to look at your business as well, there's a little bit of competition. Because remember, with one company, you're kind of negotiating with one person. If you have 2 bidders, it could bring the number up as well, or at least 2 bidders.
That's really good advice, actually, because number one, there's no lack of platform companies out there that are venture backed that are looking for good, solid, healthy IT services companies, right, to acquire, especially if everybody's trying to have that national footprint, as best they can. Interesting, really interesting. That's why I like to hear from the people that were in the chair, right?
Yeah, I would say, I actually helped 2 companies last year that were partners of ours, and they, for whatever reason, they wanted to retire or get out or whatever. So I know enough people where I put them in touch with people, but I said, look, you've got to get your ducks in a row. You got to get things in order. You got to organize everything. So when you present it, looks really clean. And it took them some time to do it, but they got a higher number because their books were in order. Things were clean. They backed things off and adjusted things to make it look clean. They try to maximize their recurring revenue as well. So you have to plan for it. Now, if you're not really planning for it and somebody comes along, you'll be able to sell your business. You're going to be kicking yourself after that. You could have got more money, right? You don't ever be kicking yourself. You could have got more money.
Yeah, you can't really go. I mean, I've only ever heard of one time, at least I call it the MSP sandbox. I've only ever heard of one time that sold their company twice to the same guy. Like they sold their company to a guy who was at one company. That company decided to divest. He bought it back for pennies on the dollar. And then the guy who bought it moved to another company and then bought the same company again. And I'm like,
that's great.
I really love that company.
Yeah, I have a client. He's a real estate, an MSP, actually a friend of mine now. He was a real estate developer, and he built a building nearby and he sold it for 16 million to a REIT. And he bought it back 2 years ago for 4 million. And now he's got it again. So yeah, you hear those stories. They're the best ones where you sell it and then you buy it back cheap and you build it back up again. A couple bites at the apple is the way to go. And again, some of these private equity deals are multiple bites at the apple. I'm seeing a lot of them happen where they might come in and buy 75% of your business. You run it, and then you go out and bring in other MSPs and gang them together. And remember, the bigger the more revenue or more EBITDA. Well, it's revenue. The higher the revenue and EBITDA, the higher the multiples. So if you can get an MSP up around 10 million and it might have a $2 million EBITDA, you're going to get 10 to 15 times the EBITDA instead of 4 to 7, which most MSPs are in the $1 to $5 million range. So, a lot of these private equities buy 75%, keep you in for 25%, and within 5 years, you get kind of 2 bites of the apple. So I know a few people got a few bites of the apple That's kind of cool.
That is nice. I mean, some people are, to your point, they may not be patient enough to stick around to get the second bite. Like some people rather be like, hey, what can you offer me now for the whole thing? All right, just make me an offer. And to your point, right? They keep a little bit back for just a contingency, but other people are like, yeah, I could stick around for a while, right? Whatever that is, 2, 3, 5, whatever it is. And then, there's a bigger roll up on the back end, but devil's in the details.
Yeah, so there's really two dates that are important. One is like after 90 days, you have what's called a true up, because you have receivables coming in and payables going out. So whatever that number gets wired or your number that you agree on, if you have a lot of receivables, they're also yours. And if you can get, and less payables, so you could get another big chunk at the end of 90 days. If you have a lot of payables and less receivables, you could be paying it back a chunk because those payables go against your number. So the 90-day true up's a big number and a big, time to kind of shake things out. And then the end of a year, usually there's a holdback period just to make sure customers don't leave or whatever, but never let that be more than 10%. Even if you can get it down to 5%, it's even better. Because, once they take over, they could screw it up, right? It's out of your control.
That is true. I mean, that's, by the way, not a fantasy, right? We've seen examples of where the screw up does happen for sure. Was there anything, like you said, you kind of kept it secret, which is hard to do. Like, how did you work it out with, and this is a part that maybe doesn't make it into the deal, right? Like how does staff transition? Like how long they keep your people around? Like, are they, like how do they treat the people side of the thing of the merger rather than just the financial side? Any words of wisdom there?
Well, you got to communicate to everybody. First of all, everybody, as an MSP or the entrepreneur, right? And we all have entrepreneur terror and we keep it to ourselves, right? But employees are employees. They have jobs and they are depending on us to provide them with their payrolls. And what's really important is when you do sell your company, I called everybody in the room and I really talked it out with them and explained why I did this as an exit, because I wanted to focus and become more of a national company. And I had a whole plan to be a compliance and cybersecurity, kind of subject matter expert. And again, our margins are going to be higher. We'd be more specialized. But I just explained to the company why I did this and that everybody had a job and they were safe. And it's going to be different. It's going to be new, but you have to really step it out and explain it to people. Because again, you want the people that bought your company to have value. So, when you deliver kind of your business to them, you're going to get a lot of money, but you also want to deliver a lot of value because your reputation is important and you want to make it work. So, some people would say, this is a acquisition, this is a merger, like really explain it. And I wouldn't, dance around it. If it's a sale and it's your exit, then tell them it's a sale and I'm leaving and it's company's being sold. If it's a merger, explain the merger, but don't call it a merger if it's a sale. So you really just want to be very clear to everybody and really step them through the process. Once the money wires, then you start the communication process.
Got it. So you did it post-transaction.
Oh, absolutely. Because what if I would have said I'm selling the company and the money didn't wire and everybody left? Right? Either clients left or the people left, you have no value. You have to be very careful as an MSP, not to let the cat out of the bag before the money wires, is what I call it.
That's fair. I mean, like business advice here, right? This is not the stuff they teach in the classroom, right? This is the real world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, wow. Going through a deal like this, what you learn is immense. It was a 7-month due diligence. They looked at every single contract and how long the contract was, how much we paid, how many hours were charged against it. 7 months of they look at everything. And you're like, well, why did I take that? Like there's things they saw, I had no idea that I may have been losing money on a project or something. I'm like, I never looked at it that way, So they look at things differently because some MSPs, are more, I was more like had a lot of relationships, a lot of clients that were my buddies almost, the relationships I built over time. They had no relationships. It was all by the book. It was all system, so they were very different and a very different culture. But when I look at different MSPs, everybody runs them a little bit differently. And you have to make sure that your culture can match their culture. So it has to be a culture match. If not, then the people start like banging heads once this thing goes together. And you won't get your hold back.
That's very true. Did you, what did you say to your customers? Right, most of them stuck around, so you must have said something right. But how
Right,
did that?
that took some work. That was at 20 hours a week. I mean, I had to go out and talk to a lot of customers and calm them down. You were my guy, right? Because remember, as an MSP, even at 40 people, I was still the main guy. I still had the relationships. Most MSPs I work with are still kind of the figureheads of the company. And that's, people know at the end of the day, they know the owner. And if something happens, they can call the owner. And that's kind of how I had it set up, and I grew the business. So that's very important. So you have to go out, almost talk to every single client and explain to them that it's going to be a smooth transition. The people pretty much are staying in place. And in some ways, it could be a better service because there's more people to service you. So you have to put a positive spin on it. And then the proof's in the pudding. They have to do a good job. Now, the MSP who bought us was bigger than us. So together, I don't know, $15 million company got pretty big. And a lot of the smaller companies that I gave this personal service to didn't feel that anymore. So some of them fell off, and they went and kept most of the bigger clients because that's really what they were focusing on. So there could be some attrition over time, but for the most part, I'd say 90% stayed for the first year or two.
That's awesome. That's great. I mean, listen, I love hearing these stories from the horse's mouth, because that way you can kind of feel what your view on the whole thing was, right? Rather than just the T's and C's part of it. Let's move on to, all right, so you sold your company. I assume you took some of the proceeds from the sale of the MSP to start this new venture ultimately, which is Choice Cyber.
Yeah. So, I have a gift. It's being a visionary. I can see the markets kind of in the future. That's my gift. I'm not good at a lot of things, but I'm really good at like seeing the vision and know where trends are going. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years. And I like to know not necessarily what's happening next month, but what's happening next, 2 to 3 years. It was very clear to me that as data just kept going more and more digital, that the cybersecurity breaches, attacks, et cetera, were just going to rise at a very high speed. And I even told some people that I thought that security was going to be bigger than MSP. And they're like, what? I'm like, it's going to be really big. This is like almost 10 years ago. And, I was doing a lot of government contractor work then, and they started getting requirements for NIST before the CMMC. And then the medical all got HIPAA. And then, the financial, we're doing a lot of SEC work and FINRA and whatnot. They start getting regulation requirements. And I said, this is kind of the future. So I put all, I was like, I just had to believe in myself. And for the first couple of years, it went pretty slow because it just didn't take off. And I was trying to teach MSPs how to do the service themselves. And then I realized that they're busy doing managed services, don't have all the people and resources in-house. So I said, you know what, I'll just do the services for you. I'll do the risk assessments. I'll be like the outsourced compliance officer. We'll just do the services. And then things start really taking off. So we were kind of like, it took time to figure out this new world around compliance and cybersecurity in this SMB space, but I kept working at it and didn't give up. And today, we have about 17 people on staff, 100 MSPs, and we're busy. Things are really good. And it took time to realize that our value is really as a services company. There's tons of software companies that'll sell you compliance or whatever, but very few service companies will get the work done to get you across the finish line. And we're more the services company to get it done. And that's I think what the market really wanted, but it took us some time to figure it out.
I mean, 2017, so the security thing really started bubbling up in, I think, 2018, 2019. I mean, to be honest. I mean, and then it was like, hey, you need to add all this stuff to your stack. And people were like, why? And it was still like kind of new. And to be honest with you, I still run into a ton of people who are still trying to figure it out because it's not static, right? It does change. And every year, right, kind of need to see what the new, situation is.
And you can't solve with a pinpoint solution, right? Like a phone system, you plug in the phone system and it's a single solution that solves, for voice. When you go in security, especially cybersecurity, it's multiple products in a stack. So, one of the first things we do when we talk to an MSP or a new MSP signs up, I have to learn their stack, because every MSP out there stack's a little bit different, right? And some offer, different firewalls, different training, different, next gen AVs, whatever they're offering. I've got to learn that, because once I learn that, then I can help them and help them, their clients. Because remember, when you do compliance, you're really teeing up the stack and matching the stack of services the MSP can provide. And that's really an art. And that's something we're really good at, is going in, doing the compliance gap analysis, and then helping the MSP match their stack up to deliver these services. It's hard to sell security. People kind of give you a stiff arm, but when you can tie it up with compliance where you have controls to meet, then people are like, they'll bring the checkbook out and they'll put these services in place because they want to check the boxes to get a good grade. Nobody wants to fail, right?
Who's setting the boxes, Steve? That's the question. Is it the insurance company? Is it specific to the vertical? Is it the federal government? Is it the state government? Is it everybody? Like, it seems like there's no one source here.
I'm sorry, one more time with the question.
Like you said, check the boxes, but like, who's setting the boxes?
Yeah, so it depends, right? So there's really like two schools. The first school is an MSP's client that has a request or know they need to have some type of structured cybersecurity framework in place. And it normally comes from either an insurance company, say you have to do it for cyber insurance, you have to have a SOC 2 audit, you have to have an ISO, whatever, or a list of things in place, which they don't call anything, just check boxes. Or it's your client's client asking them to have, CMMC compliance in place for a contract, something that the client is asking for, an ISO, a NIST, whatever, HIPAA, something in place in order to do business with them. Or they're in a vertical that just has to have it, right? So there's drivers that are kind of the known need drivers. And, every MSP has those clients. So when an MSP has a client that has a requirement for HIPAA, a requirement for CMMC, it's very clear to us what we need to do. They bring us in, we start the risk assessment, we help them build their stack around the controls, and together we provide these services. The bigger opportunity is what I call like the latent needs. It's your client that has a lot of sensitive data, that may be an accounting firm or law firm or services business or manufacturer, where nobody's really bearing down on them to do anything. But if they don't do something, they can get hit. And then if your client gets hit, it's kind of an uncomfortable conversation, and good luck keeping that client. They're going to blame it on you anyhow, right? So, there's voluntary, what I call frameworks, that you can have a conversation with your client and say, look, you can put the ISO controls in, you can put the NIST controls in, and here's why, because we know companies that have a structured cybersecurity framework have less problems than people who are just without them. So there's an opportunity for MSPs to have conversations for their clients to put these controls in place so you can check boxes, right? So it's important for the MSP's clients to have the right boxes in place that can be checked off. We get into privacy if they're doing work and they have clients in Europe, or California has this privacy law, 8 of the states have them. So it's more of a proactive conversation than waiting. That's how you'll be able to sell more of your stack of cybersecurity services. And that's something we help MSPs do.
There's definitely a debate. I was going to say argument, but I'll make it nice. I'll say debate on what the correct range of additional costs, transfer to the end customer is for the security stuff, right? Like,
yeah,
is it a percentage? Is it a certain dollar amount per user in addition to what they're already charging them? Like, obviously, if every year there's something a little bit different with some of these check boxes, do you have to put in a cushion, right? Or do you have to put an escalator in specific to security stuff? What's your general suggestion?
I look at it a little bit differently, and it's taken me a while to really understand this, but this is what works. You have to have new conversations with your clients as an MSP around change. And the biggest problems I see are MSPs that their clients in their mind have a budget for IT services. And then you come back to them trying to add more security services in there, compliance, could be a new phone system, whatever. And you're putting all this pressure into this budget. It doesn't really have any wiggle room.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of times I see the cord snapping or the problem is really kicking in. You have to almost step back and have a new conversation with your clients and say, look, managed services is about keeping the lights on, patching, help desk, new machines. It's managed services. That's your budget. You need a new budget for compliance. Compliance doesn't just have an IT component. I mean, your accounting department, your marketing department, every department of your business operations is affected by compliance, training, policies, procedures. You really need a separate budget. And then, you're doing security 1.0 as part of managed services, but now because of compliance, it's driving us to put in some security 2.0 services. You need kind of a budget for that too. So now you're building new budget lanes and you're talking the client through it. And I would say 99.9% of the time, the client goes, you know what, Eureka, you're right. I'm trying to do everything in one budget. And then once you get them to open up and realize it's new line items, then all of a sudden, then you can have the conversation and they kind of listen 99% of the time. But if you don't have that conversation, that's a problem. The other thing is competition, right? Every MSP is offering a little different service. So if you don't separate these lines, in early days when I started doing security and HIPAA and cybersecurity services, I had a medical practice that was about, I guess they were paying us around $5,000 a month. And then they were worried about security and they needed HIPAA compliance. And we went up to about $8,000 a month. But I didn't separate it. It was all kind of a big lump ball. But I was providing great services to this company. But then a competition came in and chopped us out at around $4,000 or $5,000 a month. And the customer couldn't really tell what they were getting, what they weren't getting. They just were getting a better price. And I learned that lesson hard. And once I started unraveling the services, that was a game changer. And then once I teach kind of how to have that conversation first, then it's really helped the MSP really expand and create more work for their company. So that's what I would say. So is it a percentage of revenue or whatever? It may be, and over time you can kind of build that formula in that company. But day one, you got to figure out what it costs and then make sure those services are in place to secure them and get them compliant. Then once you know the numbers over maybe a 2-year period, then you can use a percentage of revenue or sales, et cetera. Is that helpful?
That's fair. I mean, it's interesting that for what felt like a good 10-year run there, all of the industry talking heads were like, no, bundle it all, make it one price, make it simple to buy, Amazon edition, click, go, swipe and you're on. It seems like you're like, maybe you need to actually reverse that thinking now and actually break out, hey, here's these services, these services, these services, these services. So you understand that it's not just it's one big number, right? This number has a ladder that gets to a certain point.
And the reason is the customer doesn't look, you might have a sophisticated customer. MSPs calling companies that don't have sophisticated CISOs and CIOs, right? In most cases. So you're dealing with a client who's more or less a business owner or operations or whatever, or CFO or whatever, and they don't understand what they're really buying all the time. So when it's a big blob, they're looking at the top number. And that's what I found in the MSP space. So this method has been super successful and it's taken us time to figure it out. But the MSPs that use it, they protect their MSP business. Because remember, as an MSP, I used to be nervous to go out there and tell the customer spending more money. I'm afraid that, if I kept going back to them with more and more increases, that would snap the cord and they go somewhere else or shop it out. But if you keep the MSP pricing kind of in check and then bring in other layers or other lanes, you're not competing against yourself. But remember,
that's an important lesson because I think perception is a problem, right? And if they perceive that, there's, budget creep, it's probably the best way to say it. They're going to hit a ceiling, and then you almost incentivizing them to go out there and look for something different.
Right. You want to protect, and keep that customer sticky as long as you can. The other thing that I found it takes a little more work is whenever somebody doesn't have a line item in their their financial statement, getting them to put that line on them in the first time sometimes is a challenge, right? So they don't have a line for compliance. Now you're telling them they need a line for compliance. But usually when you walk them through it, they already trust you because you're their managed services, they'll do it. And that's why we work through MSPs, because the MSP already has the trust. And if it's presented properly, we get a win every single time. So, we've learned what to say, what not to say over time. But just remember, when I first started at managed services, it was really hard to sell. It was like time and material people did, or they bought machines. But going to somebody and saying, look, you're going to pay $4,000 a month, it was really hard. But then the next guy in, it was a piece of cake, right? So, because it was already carved out. So, so that's why you want to protect your managed services and not get this thing too high and wobbly, where they can come in and kind of shop it and not know what they're buying against a competitor. That's really important.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that the presentation of the services is a little bit copy and paste in a lot of places. I love when you go to like a data center vendor or a cloud services provider and they're like, oh, managed services. And you're like, managed services? How are you? It's not the same managed services as what you're selling, but it reads the same.
Yeah, I think that people, I have a writer, and the reason I hired her is because she said, I used to work for a company that really turned around. And I'm like, how'd you turn around? She said, well, they just do RFPs. So they're bidding low bid, RFPs are low bid. I hate RFPs. It always goes to the low bidder, and rarely do I get the work, but sometimes I fall for it doing RFP. She said, I turned the business around. They were winning hardly anything. I came in and started doing the writing, and we start winning all these projects, same prices. So there is kind of an art to this presentation. I think MSPs lose sight of a little bit. So it's important to have presentation. Daniel Pink talks about UI and how things look are so important, but that presentation is important, and don't make it so cookie cut. Try to make it a little more kind of unique to your client, because that presentation is important. And I kind of lost sight of a little bit as well. I was just putting out a boilerplate, and now I've kind of spruced it up. It's a little more custom, and I do think the customer appreciates it a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, the back to the perception piece, right? Like if it's prettier, it's like Apple and the rest of the PC manufacturers, right? Apple's like, hey, we're gonna raise our price, but like we're gonna simplify the buying experience, and it's gonna be like less choices, right? And you go on the other side, and the guys are like, oh no, I can give you more and more and more, but it was a little bit harder to configure. It was a little bit harder to understand what you're buying. There's some truth to that in the sales process, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why the easier it is to consume what it is, the faster the sales cycle. It's like the Amazon effect, right? Like zero touch. I know that that's probably not as much, happening in MSP land, but the closer you can make it to like a non-technical person understanding what's going on, the faster you'll get them to maybe come on board, right?
Right. But the other thing is each client, each MSP's client, because my challenge, the reason I got in this business was because, most MSPs are to local business, right? So they have 3 accounting firms, 3 medical offices, 3 defense contractors. It's impossible to come up to speed on all those compliances. So we kind of do it for them, right? So if they only have a couple of these or a couple of those, 1 month we're getting a financial referral, 1 month we're getting a accounting referral, 1 month it's a defense contractor. So, the MSP's client, they all feel like they're a little bit unique, right? Even though as a financial investment company, they're all the same, right? It's very similar. They want to feel like it's a little bit different. And I think it's important to recognize and find what those differences are in the MSP's client, so they can just kind of steer things a little bit to let them know that this is for you, and not so generic. I think that's they like that little personal service.
No, that's fair. I mean, here's the reality, right? Unless you're super verticalized and you understand what's happening in that specific industry, you're right. Like, I would say most IT services companies, managed services companies are like generalists, right? Like they have a lot of customers in a lot of different verticals. So like, I think the pandemic maybe even scared people to not have everything in one bucket, right? Because like I hope that never happens again. But like, let's say something else happens and you shut down an entire industry, then what do you do?
Right. You definitely, I think, MSPs are in good shape because it's almost like a diversified portfolio, just like the financial clients would teach their customers. Having different clients in different verticals really makes you defensive against the economy. And I had that as an MSP, and I weathered some of the worst economies, 2008, et cetera, because I had such a balance. Like my construction guys, they were like just really hurting through a number of years, but I had financial and medical, they were doing great. So I think the MSP model works really well because they're diversified.
Yeah. And then the other problem is there's, this whole security field just explodes, right? Especially with some of the new stuff, right? AI is really bleeding edge right now. Just where does that go? We'll find out, I guess. But it's getting hard to keep the talent in-house on a lot of this stuff, right? Like,
Yeah, so that's why, look, the MSP should focus on a wheelhouse. What are they really good at? And each MSP is a little bit different, but they're good at the managed services. And that's really what I try to help MSPs understand is focus, be great at that. Because if you're great at that, your competition's not coming in. I remember I became very good at managed services, and there was a new guy getting into the business, and he was trying to take my clients. And I had lunch with him because he's a friendly competition, kind of a nice guy. He said it's impossible to crack into one of your customers. I don't even try anymore. Right. So you want to make your relationship with their clients just, as boiler, as put a fence or a moat around each one of your clients and nobody comes in, and focus on your core business, and then bring in power partners that are good, that you can bring in and trust and make some money on these services, and selectively be very selective on your power partners, but focus on your wheelhouse and become very good at it, because you have the relationship. You can bring anybody in, they'll listen to you. There's no question about it. And that's kind of how we're positioned as compliance and cybersecurity. You can't have all those services in-house for that few times a year that you need it. Because some of our clients, MSPs, will bring us into one project, 2 projects a year for compliance. They don't get it every day. Some have it, bring us in 12 times. But for the most part, most MSPs you work with, are 1 to 25 employees and don't see it every day. So those services you don't see every day, but you can still bring in and control the process. I call it power partnering.
I like that power partner. Kind of means like, hey, I don't need every vendor under the sun. I need like solid, specific few, that I can really rely on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like that. Where do you think, like you say, you see your vision guy, right? So like, let's fast forward to 2026, 27, 28. So 3 to 5 years from now. What does it look like on this front for the IT services provider? Like, is there legislation? Is the insurance at this point impossible to get? Is it, hey, they just can't go into it without these things done, or else don't take on the customer? Like, I don't know. What do you think, through your eyeglasses, what does it look like?
Well, I can see a lot of things flying. I think one thing is MSPs, if they're serious about the business long term, they need some kind of certification themselves. I get deal with a lot of MSPs, and their clients are asking for these certifications. And I think there's going to be more pressure on MSPs to basically show that they have a mature security model as well, and are as secure or more secure than their clients. So that I get that question all the time, like, what do? I think for an MSP, you need something that's very general, or like a big umbrella around all yourself and around every kind of client you support. And the best framework is really the ISO 27001, because it's recognized worldwide. It's a very practical framework. And for just a couple $1,000s, like $2,000, we can issue a certification, an actual certificate that they can show their clients. So I think that's one thing that's going to be required. I think that's going to be required by your clients. It's going to be required by insurance companies, because to be checking these boxes, it's just getting away from everybody. But if you have a piece of paper that shows a certification and everybody's singing the same sheet of music, that piece of paper is going to have a lot of weight. And that's also going to separate the MSPs. If you are in a competitive situation and can show that you have a certification, next guy's, well, we read a lot of books, like Abraham Lincoln, right? But you don't really have a piece of document or a diploma. I think that's going to go a long way. So that's one area. And I think once that happens, it's going to expand, right? So there's going to be ethics around AI and additional privacy and certifications that'll happen around ethics and certifications people will have in AI, and it'll just keep expanding. And I think from a compliance standpoint, between privacy, cybersecurity, and AI, there'll be more and more standards that people need to follow. So that is the compliance world to me. I think it's going to keep growing. Our bigger clients in more complicated industries might have 4 and 5 compliances now, not just one. So I think that, I think compliance is going to grow. And then as far as cybersecurity, I don't see a lot of new technologies coming out. I see a lot of technologies that are incorporating machine learning and AI in it. That's the big twist, right? So they're taking what they have and they're adding AI and machine learning and making it better and more adaptive to watch for abnormal behavior. But for a while there, I saw a lot of new lanes of new technology. Last year, I haven't seen a whole lot of it. There are some that are out there, but everybody's kind of embedding the AI and the machine learning. So I think MSPs have to learn AI and learn what it is from an ethics standpoint to a technical standpoint, how to defend against it, how to implement it. So I think there's going to be big opportunities there. So that's a couple of areas in compliance and cyber that I see kind of in the future.
That's good. Big picture, right? Do you see the MSP and generally the IT services community, and again, everybody argues what the actual number of these are, both in worldwide and North America, it's all over the place, but is it growing or is it shrinking or is it flat? What's your perception on it?
Well, I really haven't thought about it, but I was thinking, through my list of MSPs I work with and talk to every day, I don't see a lot of new entries in the market. For a couple of years ago, I saw some, younger people getting into the business and people leaving companies to start their MSP. I really tell you, in the last couple of years, I haven't seen a lot of it. So I think the people that are in it and they're established, they're going to have a big demand. And I think the average MSP is probably aging. And not a lot of new entries in the business. I think when the cloud first came out, there was companies that were born in the cloud companies. But in the last 2 years, I would say very few of my MSPs are brand new or spinning off and taking it on. I think it's a number of reasons, but I think just the demand for technicians, I think a lot of companies didn't understand what IT was. And now every industry is part of IT. So the IT guy became more and more important. And the companies that have good CISOs and CIOs, they're going to pay them and not want them to leave. So I think there's a lot of factors going into it. But I think for the MSPs that are already established, there's a lot of opportunities because I think, I don't know necessarily a shortage, but I think a lot of these companies are going to be needing more and more of your services. What I am seeing is some of the bigger companies used to try to do everything in-house are using more managed services to do some of the patching, updates, help desk. And I see kind of more of a hybrid environment in a lot of areas. So I think that's a growth area. So I think it's, ever changing and evolving.
No, I try and learn from a lot, the people that are on the ground, right? And working with the people in the sandbox. So that's why I ask these questions, right? Because
what are you hearing? Are you seeing it the same way? You see a lot of
I guess it's regional and metro based, right? I mean, obviously there is, we keep on hearing all these cool, hey, the unemployment, the new jobs and all this, whatever, right? And you take some of that data with a grain of salt, but I still see companies announcing staff cuts, right? And everyone's still from the, bigger companies are hedging their bets on the economy. And IT is one of the, they may not can their entire department, but they're still gotta, they shrink that team down, right? And and so those people have to go somewhere, right? Like they're not just going to sit at home forever because the free handouts from COVID are long gone at this point, right? You got to work. So I still think that those people have to go somewhere. Now, do they go to an established MSP, or do they start their own thing, or do they pick a specific piece of the puzzle and just solve for that rather than do it all? I think that that's the variable, right? But
I will say universally, I hear MSPs that I talk to are having difficulty bringing in new technicians. Just as I would say a blanket, like you say, it's regional, but blanket coverage statement, I do see it's been more challenging to bring in talent into an MSP, just getting people that are really good technicians at the right price or whatever. It does seem to be somewhat challenging, and it comes in spurts, right?
yeah, no, it's true. And part of it is that everybody, nobody wants to make less, right? Everybody wants to make more. But then ultimately, does that create this sandwich effect where you're like, well, if I'm going to pay my people more, I can only afford to have less people, right? Like you can't give everybody everything that they're looking for, right? Because there's just supply and demand or whatever you want to call it. But bottom line is, can you get more nimble as an MSP? Like, can you do more with less? I don't know.
Well, I think that's where it comes back to the wheelhouse, right? So you want to do things that you're good at, that you can bill all your time for. The one-off things like compliance or even getting a new phone system, things that are one-offs you don't see every day. They're the things you power partner, and then you just stack up your people and the resources that you have and try to maximize them. So that's where I think the future is for the MSP. The other thing I see some of my MSPs doing they never did before, and the reason was when I had all these servers to manage, I had hundreds of servers to manage. I never wanted to be more than an hour away or an hour radius because I had to be Johnny on the spot if a server crashed at a doctor's office or something. So I wasn't doing work 3 hours away. So now I see, because of the cloud, some of the MSP partners are working with, they're hiring people that might be in Virginia and hiring somebody in Florida or different parts of the country or even overseas, because the help desk can be done anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
So
true.
I think there's some opportunities there for MSPs to try to bring some of these services in at a lower cost, which may be uncomfortable at first, hiring somebody that's outside the state or whatever, because we were so local oriented, but that might be some opportunities as well. Somebody in West Virginia and Wheeling may have a lower requirement for salary than somebody in downtown DC. It's just different.
100%. Steve, where do people find more information about your company, or if they wanted to chat with you a little bit, where can they find you?
Yeah. My email address is Steve, STEVE @choicecybersolutions.com. Our website is www.choicecybersolutions.com. Happy to chat and have a conversation with anybody. And I always like helping MSPs build their business. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. I've been doing this for quite a long, the MSP for 21 years and now this for 5. So I've been doing it for a long time and really enjoy it. And are you going to be at ChannelCon next month in Vegas?
I personally will not be. My partner in crime on the road will be, so you'll see him there. But I have to balance my travel schedule, or else the other half gets a little salty with me.
Yeah, I can't do them all, but we'll be at ChannelCon. We're excited about that the first week in August.
Awesome. Well, for everyone out there, if you don't know ChannelCon, it's run by CompTIA. Just Google ChannelCon. It's in Vegas this year, first week of August. That's where you'll find Steve, and I'm sure you'll find him at a couple events down the road as well. Steve, I appreciate catching up with you, my friend. I can't wait to see you on the road somewhere. And this session was recorded. You'll find it at mspinitiative.com under sessions. I like working with people that know the business. Steve's one of those guys. So it's not just another vendor. Somebody that understands should understand a lot about your business. That comes with that there's a value point there that's hard to quantify, but I like that. I appreciate your background there, Steve, and thanks for sharing today.
George, thank you very much. Always great seeing you, and thanks again.
You got it, guys. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.